Hey, what's going on, cash flow hackers? It's Chris with Life 180, and for this video, I'm going to follow up on my video from yesterday, and I'm going to be talking to you about busting financial paradigms. Because like yesterday, I'm going through and I found some videos archived from my old Life 180 roadmap course that I filmed back in 2015, and this video has got just a ton of gold in it. So what I think is really exciting about this for me is I went through and I watched it, I was like, man, I wish I had the time to like go through and redo this video with today's numbers, and I'm just too busy. I got too much going on, but I still thought the information was so relevant that I wanted to get it to into people's eyes and have you have the opportunity to watch it, listen to it, whatever your method of consuming this content is. But what I did was I basically I'm filming this intro. I'm going to tag it along. Once again, it's more of a PowerPoint format, kind of old educational style. It was a really popular format back then that Ryan Dice made really famous. I don't know if you know who that is in the marketing world. Really popular guy. But you know what? I think the content is going to be extremely educational. So if you're a life insurance agent, or if you're somebody who's thinking about utilizing this concept, the concept of utilizing whole life insurance in your life, utilizing the infinite banking concept in your life, this is going to be an extremely valuable video for you to watch to understand it and learning how to apply and why you should apply it in your life. Or if you're an agent, I think it will be really valuable in you learning how to communicate a lot of the important components of this. So as always, make sure if you find value in this, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click the bell that we get notified every time we launch a new video, and leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Have fun. Hello and welcome. Chris Kirkpatrick here, back with you as we continue down the Life 180 roadmap. I am super excited to get back into it with you with this video. And we're going to get into some really fun stuff. This video is probably going to challenge a lot about your current paradigms and your thinking around money and how you act around money. I talked last video a lot about how every single person has the ability to apply themselves to this course to accomplish their financial goals simply by doing little incremental things on a daily basis, right? Small steps, small daily actions over time equal large results, right? That's what we talked about. The challenge is that we're going to have to probably help you break down at least a few of the paradigms that you're living with about your finances, about how you view money, and how, why you make the decisions around money that you make, and maybe how you've been programmed kind of subconsciously by advertising and media and just kind of the world around us about how we act around our money. So we're going to get into that a little bit. So the first place to start is really to just sit back and kind of take a look at the classic path, what people view as the classical path to financial success. It's really pretty straightforward. I mean, you've probably heard this before. You want to be successful, you go to college, right? You graduate from high school, you go to college, you graduate hopefully in 4 years, even though nobody's doing that anymore. Very few people are doing that, I should say. You get a good job, you buy a house, you start saving for retirement. You put money into your 401k, you put money in a Roth if you're eligible. Definitely put your money in an IRA because you got to take advantage of the tax breaks, right? That's what we're told. And you buy and hold those stocks because the market's going to be up, it's going to be down, it's going to be up, it's going to be down, but you got a long time, right? The younger you are, the more risk you can take, all that stuff. So buy and hold, let it sit, let it ride. It's going to work out, trust me. And then you can retire happy on your retirement and on your Social Security, and all will be right with the world. The challenge is that there are many reasons that this doesn't work. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I want to go through some of the paradigms, and I'm going to go through a lot of the reasons that they don't work and maybe why some of those paradigms just don't function in today's world. First and foremost, the traditional quote unquote way of personal finance in this country is really anything but traditional, right? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that because it's really important as we get into this course and we start to build the foundation of your understanding of how this works. It's really important to get this out of the way. I think it's important to actually go back and look at when all of our financial problems really started to come to fruition, right? And the reality is you don't need to look too far back. If you go back as recently as the early 1980s, that's when most of the problems really began. Now, most people don't want to acknowledge that our problems actually started there because, everybody's got this perceived notion that the 1980s were such a great period of time. After all, it was like the booming 80s, right? We had crazy growth, Reaganomics, and all was right in the world. And that's when the yuppie generation was born and all was good. But it really, truly is when things started to go south. And the reason I say that is because it's when the current paradigm that we're all living in right now actually started to take hold and get a grip and kind of dig its teeth into our fabric and our way of life. And if you look at the quote unquote traditional mode of personal finance and these paradigms, the reality is you've probably saved your money, invested, purchased items. You probably used a lot of the financial products, mutual funds, and financial vehicles like 401ks and IRAs and stuff like that used to save. And what I want to do is I want to go through some of this and have a quick conversation about each one. So the 401k would probably be considered the staple or the foothold of our financial planning world. We're looking at, over 70%. The number fluctuates a little bit from year to year, but over 70% of all the money saved in retirement accounts is saved inside of a what we call a qualified account, where what a qualified account means is all of the taxation is delayed on your money. You get to postpone paying taxes on that money today to pay taxes on it later when you take it out. Now, this is one of the most common accounts that people use because it's offered by an employer. Typically, a lot of times, even though this is dropping, you get a match on some of the money, a percentage of the money that you contribute, that you actually invest in that account. But the challenge is that while everybody views the 401k as this mecca of retirement planning, it's a new phenomenon. The whole concept of a 401k didn't even exist. It was created in 1978 and it didn't even really take hold until the early 80s in 1981. And if you look at the results that we've had and how 401ks have performed over the last 35 years, it's laughable. So why is it that everybody still lives in this paradigm that we have to be putting our money into our 401k? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying 401ks are terrible. I'm saying you got to learn to know how to manage expectations around them. And if you're getting a company match, by all means, you have to take advantage of that. But if you're not, well, then you need to take a serious look at what your alternatives are. Now, mutual funds. I put mutual funds after 401ks for a very specific reason. It's because when 401ks were created and people started investing in them, in their 401ks, most of the time that money was put in mutual funds. The growth of mutual fund companies, the expanse of that industry as a whole has been just exponential in this industry, in the financial world, since the early 80s. And the reality is that what mutual funds did, what 401ks did, and it was lead to the average everyday American going from, being really conservative in investing to taking their money and just putting it in their 401k where they are pretty much detached from the results from it, putting it into mutual funds and letting it sit there and not really understanding how the product works and just letting it sit. And that whole buy and hold mentality was born, and that's led to a lot of the catastrophic results that we've had for the last 35 years. And Roth IRAs are kind of like the little brother to the 401k. Unlike delaying taxes and kicking the can down the road, they're a little better in the sense that you pay taxes up front, it grows, and you can have access to it in retirement tax-free. That's actually better. It was created in 1997 as part of the Taxpayer Relief Act. And I want to focus on that because the Roth IRAs right now are kind of like the darling of middle America, of middle class America, because of the tax benefits, because of the fact that financial advisors just love selling these things because of all the benefits. Now, the challenge if you make enough money, you actually don't even qualify for them, and you do lose liquidity of that money. And so there's a cost to losing that liquidity. And that's a reason that even though they're right for some people in certain situations, don't get me wrong, they're not what you want to be using until, as a financial vehicle, I should say, until you've built the foundation of your financial life up. So the boogeyman in the closet is kind of the credit card, right? Because even though credit cards or charge cards, I should say, were created in the 1940s, 1950s, and really evolved there a little bit, the national credit card database and the whole infrastructure to allow for credit card processing wasn't even developed until the 1970s. I mean, think about Visa didn't even exist until 1976, right? I mean, and so if you were born after 1980, this is probably completely new information for you. Credit cards didn't even really take flight. They weren't even popular until the 1980s, and that's when and this is what I'm saying, that's when our debt became a real issue. People started losing grip, and free credit became so easily accessible to people that rather than having to delay gratification to go out and get clothing, to go out and get dinner, to be able to take vacations, to be able to do all these things, rather than having to save and pay cash for those things, people now are just able to slap it down on a credit card. And at this point in time, the average American household is paying over $2,500 a year in interest on their credit card debt. That's just interest. That's 10% almost of the average income in America, just in interest on credit cards. Now, all these vehicles were actually slowly introduced to get going, and some of them, like credit cards, even took decades to kind of come to fruition and actually take hold in our economy. But the challenge is once they actually sank their teeth in and they sank their teeth into our economy and into our way of life, it made life easy, right? Human nature is to take the path of least resistance, and because of that, the convenience of them psychologically made it so Americans, middle class, didn't mind just transferring away their potential wealth and giving up control of their financial life. And maybe it's just me, but I think it's a little odd, that people consider, this traditional rules of American personal finances paradigm that we live in, that we got to go to school, get a job, and all these things, and invest in 401ks and buy a house, and we use credit cards and we finance all this stuff. We don't delay gratification. And the reality is that this is literally a 35 to 40-year-old paradigm that we're living in. And for some reason, even though it's worked for some people in certain ways, for most people it hasn't. And it's been the worst performing decade that we've ever had, as far as if you look at the amount of money people are saving compared to the results they're getting. And on top of that, it's the best performing, technically speaking, stock market period that we've ever had. So how can that be the case? Well, I'll tell you how, and I'll kind of show you how. We're going to talk about it, and that's kind of what this first module is heavily focused on. Is we're going to show you how the traditional system, quote unquote, has failed you, right? The last 35 to 40 years has been a complete and utter failure. You look at the statistics. I don't need to keep beating that dead horse, but I want to bring you back and show you the traditional system, the real traditional system, how people actually navigated their financial lives before all of this, before we ran amok in this system that we're living in now. So I want to show you the strategies that most of Americans were using during the greatest growth period in the time of our history. I was told once, actually, that if you want to be successful, the key to being successful, the number one key to being successful, is to go out, find somebody that has the life that you want on every capacity, and just emulate them, right? See if you can mentor under them and emulate them. And right there, so I want to bring you back to the standard and show you the strategies and the philosophies that were being used by people in this country, seriously, people in this country that we're actually making it work. I'm going to bring you back to the principles that allowed families to actually have one person in the home and one person working, and and raising a family and all that stuff. And it's not, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's definitely doable. But some of the principles have to change, and there are some ways that you have to structure your life accordingly to be able to accomplish it. And if you look at the most successful people today, the top 1%, the top 5%, however you want to kind of classify it, but if you look at that success category, that upper echelon of people who have financial security, it's very simple. These people understand it. They didn't get there by accident. You don't luck your way to success of that level. So they understand these principles, and all I want to do here is go back to basics and share these principles with you. So let's take another look at the current paradigms that people are living in. This is just another look at the kind of traditional mode, the paradigm that we're living in, the life path, if you will, of financial success, right? So what I want to do here is go through them one by one and have a little conversation and get the conversation going, get your brain going, get you thinking about maybe what you've done in these areas, right? I'm going to talk about, I don't know you specifically. So what I want to do is talk about what the average person out there, what the national paradigm, if you will, is about each of these topics. And you'll be able to kind of resonate and discern what relates to you, what doesn't. And then as you go through the course, you can figure out, what areas do you have to work on the most. Now, first up, obviously, out of high school is you got to go to college, right? And the thing is now you got 70% of high school graduates actually applying and trying to go to college at this point in time. And the challenge with that is that you can only have so many people in a workforce with college degrees before it actually devalues that the value of that college degree itself, of that degree itself. And we're seeing that right now, right? We're seeing there's how many people are going to school and not able to get a job, right? College costs are going up. The more the federal government subsidizes college, the more they, over 80% of all college loans right now are backed and guaranteed by the government. Now that's a two-sided blade, right? A double-edged sword, if you will, because that debt is not, you can't get out of it, right? You can't go bankrupt on it. You can't default on it. You owe that forever. You essentially, when you take a loan from the federal government for college, you are not getting out of that for the rest of your life, right? And the challenge is that because the government is giving these loans out, it is guaranteed pretty much. They're giving out crazy amounts of money. So kids are just going to colleges. And when colleges know that kids are going to get in, right, and they know that they don't have to worry about finding financing and it's way easier than it used to be, what are the colleges doing? They're just upping the cost of college. And there's a reason that the inflation rate of college since 1980 has more than doubled the inflation rate that we've seen in our GDP, of our gross domestic product, which is how we calculate inflation. We'll get into that more later. But that's the thing. That's a problem. People are paying $100,000 for a social work degree now because of these problems, and they're getting out of school, and they're lucky if they can get a $30,000 a year job. Job placement is way down. We've talked about that. Unemployment rates for college graduates, young college graduates under the age of 25, are through the roof. Incomes are stagnant, right? We've had inflation going up, but actual costs, the actual real incomes in our economy are going down, and kids are getting out of school, not able to get a job with all this debt, and it's going to start to have an impact on the housing market. We'll get into that in a second too, but it's going to have an impact on the housing market because when kids get out of school without a job and with all this debt, their college payment winds up being almost the equivalent of a mortgage payment, and that will lead to problems. I kind of got a little ahead of myself. I talked about a little bit of this stuff on the last slide, but the bottom line is if you look at labor participation rates, now I don't care what anybody says about the quote unquote unemployment rate. That number doesn't matter. What really matters is the labor participation rate. What percentage of people in this country are actually participating in the workforce, right? That's the number that matters. The unemployment rate is literally just a number there that's meant to kind of mislead you, in my opinion, because once you're on unemployment, Unemployment simply only counts for people who are collecting an unemployment benefit. When that benefit expires, you no longer count. You don't have to get a job to go off unemployment. You just have to stop qualifying for a benefit. So once people run out of their unemployment insurance, they're no longer unemployed. That actually drops the unemployment rate, which is just completely crazy to me. But here's the thing. The labor participation rate right now is the lowest it's been in 38 years. That's not getting any better. So don't believe the unemployment rate numbers. Good luck getting a job right now. It's really tough. Even people who are going to college and paying for these degrees, they get out. What are they doing? They're getting jobs in the service industry. They're bartending. They're doing things. They're getting manual labor jobs, and they're all jobs. They're more and more regularly having to settle on jobs that they didn't need the degree for in the first place. So what is the ultimate cost of that? The answer to that, you can't calculate it, but the bottom line is it's stealing from our future. Now, the next step is to buy a house, right? Now, I'm going to do a lot of talking on this, really a lot of talking throughout this course. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's probably the most common question that I have is, when should I buy a house, right? Can I afford a house? What can I afford for a mortgage? Stuff of that nature. And people have this affinity with a house because we all need to live somewhere, right? And we've been kind of programmed that it's our human right to own a house, and it's something that we all strive for. But the challenge is this: is that if you lived in the last generation, let's say my parents' generation, I'm 35, so right now I'm 35. My parents, first entered the workforce in 1980-ish, 1979, 1980. So the interest rate environment and everything, and I'm going to get into this in a lot more detail later, so don't worry about it too much for right now. But that period of time, the last 35 years, quite frankly, real estate was one of the best investments you could have gotten into. And I'll explain why in great detail later. But right now, I am scared to death of the housing market. I am scared to death for anybody that is close to upside down on a mortgage. Anybody that thinks they're going to buy a house and it's going to hold its value over a long period of time, I really worry for them. And obviously, there's nothing set in stone. There are no guarantees I'm right or anybody kind of knows what's going to happen. But you can look at the history of things and see what's going to happen. And I'll show you. I promise as we go through this. If you're on the edge of buying a house right now, all I say is wait until you get through this to see what I'm talking about. Now you can see there's huge volatility in the market, right? 2008, the housing market crash, the stock market bubble crash, all that stuff kind of was predicated because we had in 2000 we had the dot-com bubble burst, and what happened? Everybody flew to the housing market. Everybody went to real estate, and so that built that bubble up over 7 or 8 years, and that bubble burst, and now it's just gone into government backed security, like with treasure, with bonds and stuff like that. Everybody's just investing in the government, which is craziness because they're just printing money. But the bottom line is that if you look at the housing prices right now, average housing prices in the United States in 2014 were $311,000, right? Let's go back in history and look at what this means for us. It's not sustainable because right now a house is 6 times the 6-to-1 ratio on the average household income in America, right? So the average household income is 51,000 bucks. The average house is 311,000. That's a 6 times ratio. Back in 1980, the ratio was 2.16 to 1, so just over 2 to 1 in 1980 from what a house cost compared to the income. So this is all done because interest rates are artificially low, because we've had a really big boom in population, so that's spurred growth. We'll talk about that next video. I promise is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get a lot of history, a lot of that stuff, and we're going to get a little more detail. But interest rates are at all-time lows right now. The federal funds rate, which is really, really important that you understand what the federal funds rate is. It's the rate the Federal Reserve creates money, right? And they dictate what the federal funds rate interest rate is. Right now, it's at 0. The average of all time is upwards of 5%. So we're at an average of where the average should be 5. We're at 0 right now. We've never been at a long-term rate under 1. And when I say long-term, I mean more than like a year. We've never been up until 2009 below 1 for any period of time. We've been at 0 to a quarter percent since 2009 for almost 7 years. And so there's one thing we know is that interest rates are going to go up. And when interest rates go up, the housing market has to come down. And of course, you heard me earlier say student debt is going to be causing a lot of challenges. So there's a perfect storm, in my opinion, coming. I've left some stuff out on this, by the way. It gets even worse for housing. I don't want to spend too much time on it here, but there's a perfect storm coming when it comes to the housing market. Now, it's pretty standard for people to understand that they should be saving 10% of their income. The challenge is that it's pretty much not doable for the average American family at this point in time, because 10%, if you want to be able to achieve what you want to achieve financially, they say you got to save 10%. You got to be able to invest that money. You got to buy and hold. You got to let it ride. Well, 10% for the average American family is $430 a month. And I could tell you right now, I'm lucky if I can help, or I'm lucky, I should say, that I see somebody saving $100 a month when I first meet with them. Now, there are a lot of things we can do to help people get there, and I'm going to walk you through exactly that process, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. You're in the right spot. But how do we expect people to save $430 a month when only 40% of Americans even have $500 total saved? How can they have 430 a month when they only have 500 total saved? So it's just, the numbers are so mind-boggling, it's almost not believable. And I think one of the most frustrating things that I encounter as a financial coach is people's affinity with these 401ks, Roth IRAs, and IRAs. Because here's the challenge, is that when you put money into these accounts, you're tying that money up essentially. You're tying that money up until you're 59 and a half. And there's an old adage in the world, and that adage is cash is king. And I don't necessarily agree with that entirely, but I will say this: access to cash is king, right? Keeping your money safe, keeping it, having your money liquid, having access to it so you can use it, so you're in control of it, so it's safe, is really important. And when you put your money in here, into any of these vehicles, that money is in an extremely volatile account. I'm going to explain all this in real detail. That money's in really volatile accounts. You're not really saving, you're not really investing, you're really just speculating, because you don't understand what you're doing. You should never invest in anything you don't understand. So and when you do, that's not investing, that's speculation. And I know that most people are investing with advisors, but over 90% of advisors after fees are not even able to beat the indexes, the major stock indexes. So if you want to do any of that, just go buy one of the major indexes and don't worry about it. But you need to keep access to cash. And when you do that, the reality is that this has been one of the greatest financial experiments of all time, right? Of all time. And it's turned out completely horrifically, because the results have been awful. We've never been more broke as a country and as a people. And how is it that we live in the wealthiest time, literally the wealthiest time in the history of the world, in the wealthiest nation, yet 92% of people in this country aren't able to retire by using exactly these vehicles? Why is it then that people still feel compelled to dump money into them? I have no idea. Most people have been taught that, the buy and hold strategy is the way to go, right? Because even though the market's going to be up, it's going to be down, it's going to be up, it's going to be down, and it is what it is. The thing is that it all averages out, right? That's what we've been told. If you just buy and hold, even though the market's going to be up and down, it'll average out, right? This average rate of return, the second one down, third one down there, the average rate of return, even though it's up and down, you could still average 8% over a long period of time. So even though, if you just hold through the down years and don't worry about it, don't even look at your money, we've been taught, you're good to go. That is just a complete fallacy. Things like dollar cost averaging, the younger you are, the more risk you can take. All this stuff is completely asinine. I didn't even put on here the fact that when you pay a money manager to manage your money, if you pay them simply a 1% managed money fee and your account averages 7% over a decade, which is very, very, very liberal on my end, because since 2000, I should say, the average rate of return in the stock market has been 1.54% on people's money. So that's just, it's crazy. So if people are averaging 7% and you're paying a 1% managed money fee, you lost over a decade 26% of the potential value of your portfolio. Now I think you're starting to see why I get kind of fired up about this, and the thing is that they tell you if you just do everything we just talked about, right? Even though I've painted a pretty glum picture of it, and you're starting to see why I've created this course and why I think it's so important that you share this course with anybody you know, that to go through those processes and retire, and be able to retire on the money that you saved and live on Social Security. The question is, what do you have left, right? You don't have anything left. 92% of people have proven that. Social Security, who knows, about Social Security? I think the first person to ever take a Social Security benefit was this woman named Ida Hunt, I believe her name was. And I think she put something like $25 into Social Security and ended up taking out over 20-something thousand dollars in benefit. Now, that's a pure definition of a Ponzi scheme, as far as I understand it. And Ponzi schemes are great for the people who get into them at the very beginning, but it's the people who get in at the end who are left holding the bag. And the reality is that we're pretty close to the end here. So I wouldn't bank on it. Now, I'm not saying Social Security is going to be gone, but I do think Social Security, if you're under the age of 40 or 45, Social Security will not look like it looks like today when you hit retirement age. That's the reality. So the system needs to change. They're going to push back eligibility probably. They'll probably make some other changes to it as well. But the bottom line is that I wouldn't bank on Social Security. And the whole retire happy concept is just, it's a pipe dream at this point in time with the current way people are going about planning for retirement. Now, you've been fed these antiquated rules about how money works. And I don't know, somehow these rules have been labeled as traditional, and it's probably the greatest marketing campaign of all time. But these rules of traditional personal finance have produced the worst long-term 30-plus year financial results in the history of our great country. How is it that we've just lived through the greatest economic stock market boom ever, yet more and more people are unable to make ends meet right now? I think that's what people are feeling. So here's the reality. And I really, really want you to have this sink in, because it's extremely important. It's that, markets are going to change. Stock markets are going to change. Economies are going to be challenging. Things are going to be tough, but it's all cyclical, right? It goes round and round and round. The challenge is, if we know that the market's going to boom and bust on a fairly predictable basis, why is that not part of our plan? Why are people constantly, on a consistent basis, getting slaughtered financially when we have a quote unquote market correction? If it's a market correction, we know that's going to happen. We know the boom and bust cycle happens. We know that financial bubbles happen on a really consistent basis. In fact, for the average person, it's going to happen 4 times or 5 times, 4 to 5 times during their working career. Why are we not planning to protect ourselves from these bubbles that hurt everybody? We're going to answer all that in the next couple of videos, because it's all really simple. And when you see it, I know a light bulb is going to go off in your head. Now, I promise that this course is probably going to challenge most of what you think to be true about money and how money works, the history of money and all that stuff. But here's the deal. I also promise that it's going to make complete sense. I hope you're excited, because once you learn this, your life is never going to be the same. You're going to be learning the most important information that you need to know in order to actually create wealth. And we're going to do it not by taking more risk, not by putting your money in the market, but by earning interest instead of paying it. By giving you the ability to create your own infrastructure, your own economy, if you will, so you can capture your wealth leaks, right? Eliminate the unnecessary losses of money, right? Eliminate the unnecessary costs of insurance, avoid unnecessary taxation, reduce or eliminate long-term care insurance or disability costs as you get older, have access to your money for opportunity, which people don't have right now, and boost your savings account by 400 plus percent without losing safety of your money or liquidity of your money. But before we get to all that stuff, we got to talk a little bit more about history. Because if you want to know where you're going, you got to know where you've been. And I know it probably feels like we're taking a lot of time to get into the action steps, but I promise you it's very intentionally done that way. I promised you at the beginning of the course that you wouldn't be just in a better position financially at the end of the course, that you would actually understand not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And history plays a big part in that, so you have to understand it. So if you haven't already, get your notepads out because you're going to need them. So the good news, for the small group of people who invest the time in their life to figure all this stuff out, there is going to be an abundance of opportunity. And you're going to have the opportunity to change the path of your life financially, as far as freedom goes and everything. So I hope you're as pumped as I am. Until you watch the next video, remember, live abundantly, live efficiently, live life 180. We'll see you then.